Red rural America voted to cut off their nose to spite their face. They voted for their own oppression. They voted to hurt themselves and their communities. I've made a number of videos over the last several days about the ways that that is impacting rural Oregon, especially as an Oregonian. I am witnessing how folks in my state, in the rural counties that went very heavily for Donald Trump, are being harmed by his policies, by what Elon Musk and Doge are doing, by billionaires getting their greedy, grubby hands on the services funded by our tax dollars that are meant to benefit us, the American people. And it is deeply sad to see folks in the rural part of my state who were already suffering, right? Part of the reason that they voted for Trump, part of the reason that they became radicalized for MAGA is because the economic situation and their quality of life in rural Oregon was not good. Rural red Oregon uses a disproportionate amount of social services. They need more Medicaid. They need more food stamps. They need more free and reduced lunch. They need the tax base from the blue parts of the state, because the red parts of the state are struggling. The folks there are not thriving. The thing is that they voted for MAGA thinking that the problem was immigrants and queer people and women having reproductive rights, when really the problem is billionaires are bleeding us dry. But unfortunately, they voted in two billionaires, Trump and Musk, who then installed a bunch of other billionaires in the cabinet and other places in government, who are now wrecking all of the programs that our tax dollars fund and that rural Oregonians and rural folks all over America rely on to lead dignified lives. Services that are necessary and benefit rural Oregon. I've talked about the ways that schools and federal workers are being impacted, but now I want to talk about the way the industry is being negatively impacted in communities that voted heavily for Trump. And I would like to use Coos Bay, Oregon as an example. I'm going to be referencing an article from Politico from March 26th. It is titled, "They Voted for Trump. Will he greenlight their $2 billion infrastructure project?" The Biden administration awarded more than $50 million to revitalize a port on Oregon's southwestern coast, but Trump's efforts to slash federal spending have put that project in jeopardy. Location, Coos Bay, Oregon. More than a dozen lumber mills once dotted the landscape around Coos Bay, a horseshoe-shaped estuary on Oregon's remote southwest coast. Now, there's just one. The timber industry dominated the state's economy for more than 100 years. Then in the 80s and 90s, trade and environmental policies decimated timber country, permanently altering Oregon's economy. It also transformed the area's politics. Voters in Coos County, historically a blot of blue in a sea of rural red, voted for President Donald Trump by more than 20 percentage points last November. Took a second to pull up the election results from Coos County from November. Here you can see that the county went 58% for Donald Trump. Also voted for the Republican candidate for Congress, however, district is larger than just Coos County, and so Van Hoyle, the Democrat, won that race. They also voted heavily, 60%, for the losing candidate for Attorney General. Dan Rayfield won, thank God. He is part of that cohort of Democratic attorneys general who have been filing lawsuits against the Trump regime, attempting to defend the constitutional rights of their constituents. He's doing a really good job defending the rights of Oregonians. Also, something interesting to note, on the ballot in Oregon this last election was the option to have ranked choice voting across the state. They voted 70% against ranked choice voting. I think that's very, very telling, actually. Maybe I should get into ranked choice voting in another video, but let's get back to the article. Right, so you can see how conservative this formerly blue county went in the last election. I see the attraction of Donald Trump because he'll talk about the forgotten man, said former Oregon State Rep Brian Clem, a Democrat raised in the town of Coos Bay. He's speaking to them in a way people haven't in a long time. Now, local officials are banking on a $2 billion plus plan to revitalize the Coos Bay port and jumpstart the region's stagnant economy. But the project relies on funding awarded by the Biden administration, and the entire plan is in limbo under Trump. This is the same situation I talked about in the grant schools, where they were going to get a Department of Energy grant, and Donald Trump has yanked that out from under them. And now the schools are left holding a giant bill, and they can't finish their construction projects. This project in Coos Bay relies on a combination of state, federal, and private funding, and it would deepen the channel and allow for larger container ships to come in. It would improve the existing rail line and would add 8,000 jobs to a county that desperately needs them. I mean, this is one of the things the government is supposed to do, use our tax dollars to fund infrastructure and provide jobs for people and boost the economy. Musk wanting to take our tax dollars away from those kind of projects and put them in his own pocket and the pocket of other billionaires is destroying rural America. It's going to get a lot worse, y'all. Biden had scheduled 65,000 projects around America like this one, meant to revitalize the economy of rural places all over the United States. Actions so far from the Trump administration have cast uncertainty as to whether these funds that have been allocated for this project will ever be received by Coos Bay. Trump has already broadly frozen all kinds of federal grant programs, including some of the money that was allocated in this infrastructure bill. Repeatedly denigrated the big spending packages that were hallmarks of the Biden administration. He has not spoken specifically about the Coos Bay port, but the White House would also not respond for a comment. Clem, that former Oregon state Democrat, voted for Trump in the last election. He's also working on this lumber port project. He says he hopes that Trump's attacks on Biden-era projects won't kill their port plans. Then goes on to appeal to the Trump administration to deliver for their community, that Trump promised he was going to make their community great again. And this is a chance for him to follow through on what he promised. Sweetheart, Trump does not care. He does not care about honoring his word. He does not care about delivering on promises. He does not care about you or Coos Bay, Oregon at all. He does not care about rural Americans. The article then goes on to talk about how Joe Biden and Senator Ron Wyden worked together to get this project put in place to try to revitalize Coos County, where again, high unemployment, people are struggling. They've seen the loss of the industry they had for 100 years. Democratic Senator Ron Wyden and Joe Biden were committed to helping this community recover their economy, provide 8,000 jobs. Let's be clear here. Musk wants to cut necessary projects so he can line his pocketbooks, but also Trump is having his revenge tour. He hates Biden and the good policies that Biden wanted to roll out, so he is canceling things like these infrastructure funding packages just to be petty, just because they were Biden's idea. Article then goes on to interview Oregon Rep. Cliff Bentz, who is a Republican. By the way, he supports DOGE and what they're doing to our Social Security and our veterans. He supports gutting Medicaid and SNAP benefits, even though those are all things that his constituents rely on heavily. His district has agricultural products they would love to export through an improved Coos Bay port. I'll support them as best I can, he said. This is going to have to sort itself out, Bentz added. We'll have to wait and see who's in charge of making the decision. This plan of Biden's would have allowed up to 2 million containers a year to come through Coos Bay. That's more than the major port north of us in Canada. It would be hugely competitive and good for the American economy. So there's something really crucial that I want folks to understand here. Rural America is suffering. Rural America does not have the quality of life that they deserve. Rural America feels that they don't have access to the American dream. I know it can be tempting to believe that rural Americans only voted for Trump because they're racist and misogynistic. But y'all, that oversimplification is missing the root of why these folks who used to vote blue are voting MAGA. It's generational poverty since the 70s, says politically unaffiliated North Bend Mayor Jessica Engelk. Lack of industry has devastated families and businesses over the years. The decline of timber has been devastating for these folks. Trump swooped in and said, I'm going to make your community great again. I'm going to revive it. I'm going to help you reclaim a time when you all were prosperous. You had a good quality of life. And that is such a tempting, compelling message to people that feel abandoned, to people that are susceptible to the lies that Trump has been selling. I'm telling y'all, rural America wants the same things that we want. Want access to the American dream. They want a good quality of life. They know that things are not as they should be. They know they are being squeezed. They know that they don't have opportunity. They know that they are suffering. The problem is they don't realize who is causing that suffering because they've been so susceptible to Fox propaganda from the right, from the Heritage Foundation, from talk radio, from Joe Rogan. So they don't understand that it is billionaires, it is corporations that have done this to all of us, that none of us are living the life we should be living. All of us are being deprived. All of us are being squeezed. Because of the super rich, because this is an oligarchy, because the billionaires are stealing from us. They're stealing our wages and our life hours and our quality of life. That is the message that Democrats need. They need to speak into the poverty and the suffering and the deprivation of rural America. Folks in Coos County said that they supported Trump because they believed he would bring back jobs for the people of Coos County. They overwhelmingly voted for him because of that. In reality, we are going to see these communities lose their funding, lose access to health care, Social Security, Medicare, and these rural counties heavily depend on food stamps. The suffering is only going to increase dramatically under Trump. And these folks are not even really seeing yet exactly what's going to happen because of what they voted for. Democrats, pro-democracy folks, we need to give rural America a compelling vision. It can't just be no Trump. It has to be a promise of a better way, a chance for these communities to be revitalized and to prosper.